It was 50 years ago today, June the 20th of 1975, when the movie Jaws was released to theaters and the world changed where movies were concerned. And I have to tell you, I love the movie. It's one of my all-time favorite movies. It's in my all-time top 10. And I've seen it, I don't know how many times, at least 100 times, I'm guessing, if not more. And I thought that because of this occasion, I should say something about the movie. This is not going to be my official review of the movie. That'll come some other time. I don't know when. But I felt like I wanted to say something on this 50th anniversary. And I thought I'd just tell you the early days for me of Jaws and what I went through back then. For one thing, when Jaws came out and I saw it in the movie theater, I was 13 years old. I think it was the perfect age to see that film at that age. And I was loving going to the beach. I was always at the beach with my family, and I loved going in the waves. I was a fish. You couldn't get me out of the water. Of course, like they say, after seeing Jaws, it was very difficult to go back into the ocean. That's not a joke. That's not a cliche. It was the truth. Now, before I ever saw the movie, before I even heard of the movie, I would walk to school. And I remember my earliest memory of Jaws, my earliest memory of hearing anything about Jaws, with Jaws in the title, was when I was walking to school one day, and I don't know what the year was. It could have been 1974, or it could have been the very, very first couple of months of 1975. But there was a little corner store, very little tiny mom and pop place, that had a pyramid of books, like a triangle, and this was the book. And I remember I had never heard of the movie. It wasn't a blockbuster or anything. I just saw this title, Jaws, and I thought, what does that mean? The teeth of the shark. And it just looked like a scary book. Now, this particular copy, I think I bought later. This has the blurb on there. It says, "Now a spectacular motion picture from Universal." And I think this was definitely before the movie was out, because I hadn't heard of the movie. I don't think the copy that I had that blurb on here. I looked in the beginning of this book. It turns out this is supposedly the 35th printing. This is the 35th printing of this book in 1975. I think this one is from August of 75, and that's, months after the movie was released. So anyway, that's the first I'd ever heard of it, though. And the next thing I remember is that my mom had gone to see the movie. Everybody was talking about it. Back then was a simpler time. You didn't have the internet. You weren't bombarded with all this kind of stuff to cloud your brain and have all kinds of different media images racing around, news, television, even movies. It felt like it was a smaller world at the time. Jaws was the new thing. It was talked about. Everybody went to see it, just as The Exorcist had been a year or two before that. And I remember my mom had gone to see it, and she came home, and we lived with my grandparents at the time, and my grandfather and my mom were discussing this over the kitchen table one morning after she'd seen it. He wanted to know some information on it. My grandfather was always interested in stuff like this. I mean, not horror movies per se. And again, Jaws is not really a horror movie, but it qualifies, even though it's an action adventure film, really, and it's a drama too. But anyway, I remember my grandfather talking to my mother and asking about how they handled the special effects. How did they show the shark? And my mother, I remember her specifically saying, well, there's a lot of shots where you just see the head coming at you, like you see the head. I remember her saying that. And that's my next memory of Jaws. Well, finally, one glorious afternoon, she took me to see Jaws. And the way it was in those days, the movie would be playing over and over again. And we went to the show. I don't remember what time it was. I'm going to say the show was about maybe like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, around that time, maybe 4 o'clock, late afternoon. And I remember standing in the lobby where the concession stand is. And back then, you didn't go into the movie theater until the show before was over. But I couldn't resist as a child. I couldn't resist looking through the little square window to see what was going on in the show before mine. And the first thing I ever saw on the screen of Jaws was an image, and everybody who's seen the movie will know this by heart. I know I do. It was, I think, the first glimpse I had that I remember was nothing really exciting, really. It was when the men were trying to repair the damage to the ship after they'd all gotten drunk, and there was the lights went out. I guess the next day, you see their arms coming up with tools, and they're reaching for tools. That's the first thing I saw. I mean, they're discussing things and they're trying to fix the damage. And then I stayed there and I watched, and pretty soon came the scene where the barrels had come to the top and you didn't see the shark, and they were kind of like trying to get the ropes to pull the ropes. And all of a sudden, the shark jumps up, that famous shot. The mouth kind of goes for a second and goes back. I don't want to see anymore because I want to be surprised. That's the first thing I ever saw of Jaws. Now, when I saw the movie, I loved it. I fell in love with it. Everything worked. The humor, it was funny. It was scary. It was serious. I was interested in the characters, particularly Captain Quint and Richard Dreyfuss's character, Hooper. Those were the two that I was really drawn to. And of course, all the scary scenes that made you jump. The boat that came out, the head of the coming out of the boat. I'm sorry, I'm thinking of all kinds of scenes. The head that came out of the boat. Ben Gardner's head came out. The whole theater screamed. In those days, we weren't desensitized. Nobody was desensitized yet. We hadn't seen all these slasher movies and all these kind of explosion, giant crazy body parts movies all over the place. So the audience still was able to be surprised and thrilled. So it was great to see everybody acting together. Everybody in the theater was into it together. And I know my mother gave me a look because she knew the scene was coming up where Captain Quint was going to be eaten alive by the shark and the blood was going to spurt out of his mouth. And back then when you're 13, oh, Mom, look, blood. Hey, they're showing blood, And she looked at it because she knew I'd get a kick out of that as a kid, that little bit. And I loved the movie. And on the ride home, I remember specifically, it's incredible. When I was driving home, I was in the back seat of the car. I wasn't driving. I was in the back seat. My parents were driving, my mother, whoever was driving. And I can recall still to this day, 50 years later, thinking of the music, thinking about what I just witnessed. It never left me. That's how movies were in those days, at least for me. It wasn't just a movie. It was a life-altering experience. I kept thinking of the girl who was swimming and what happened to her at the beginning, and the music and the excitement and the theme song. Jaws, dun, 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 the theme song. It all was there for me. I didn't forget it. And then in the weeks and summer months to come, I saw it at least 4 or 5 more times. It seems like I saw it different theaters, different people I was with, different friends, sometimes some cousins. We would go, we'd wait online. And that was the summer of Jaws, and that's what it was. And then the next time I remember seeing Jaws in a theater was, I think, 1977 or 78. They brought it back 2 or 3 years later, and I saw it again on the big screen. And I'm happy to say that I've seen it on the big screen even in the last 10 years. The last 10 years, Jaws has been shown at theaters. And I've seen it at least two other times I can think of in recent years. And I know that this year, 2025, they're going to be having it back on the big screen again. I don't know exactly when the showings are going to be. I think they're going to be in late August, I've heard. And I'll be there again because Jaws is one of those movies you have to see on a big screen. And I remember after you saw this movie the first time and you knew what to expect, on subsequent showings, you'd go and you'd wait for the exciting scenes that were about to happen, and you'd look back at the audience like you knew that Ben Gardner's head was going to pop out of that boat and the hull of the boat, and you just turned around like this and you watched the audience all jump at the same time. What can I say? We were different then. It was an audience group experience. Everybody got into it together. Everybody was there to be thrilled together. And great times, great memories. Movies like this, they don't make anymore. This was the first big 100 million or whatever it was dollar blockbuster, summer blockbuster. And it's a great one. You know, what can I say about the movie? That's why this is not a review. I'll do a review one of these days, but I don't know. Maybe I'll do a review for the 100th anniversary. No, it won't take that long. But yeah, I just wanted to do something, anything, to commemorate the 50th anniversary of this fantastic film. Thank you, Steven Spielberg, and thank you, Richard Dreyfuss, Robert Shaw, Roy Scheider, and all involved, and Peter Benchley, who wrote the book.